quarantine spirit, am I right? Yeah, less stress, let your mind be free. Shift when the fog lift, you can finally see. There's a feedback loop that delay like an echo. Tune your frequency up and let go. Loud and clear is how you need to hear. And reason disappear when you feed the fear. There's a feedback loop, the warp like distortion. Keep your mind sharp like a swordsman.
Hey everybody.
Yes. Hello.
Welcome back to another episode of the Unashamed Truth podcast. This is episode number 13. Can you imagine?
Oof.
Yeah. So how's everybody doing tonight?
Me tired, man. Me tired.
You tired, yeah?
Me
Joey?
tired.
Yeah, same here. I just finished work before logging in, so.
Oh shoot, okay, so you just like clocked out one place, clocked in the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Well, I've actually been doing some running around too. I finished work and then I did some things around the house, cleaned the bathroom and everything like that. And then I was contemplating, do I have enough time to cut the grass? And then I'm like, probably not.
Very ambitious, man. Very ambitious.
Yeah, too ambitious sometimes. But I'm ambitious for all the wrong things, you know?
That's it.
Yeah. Welcome everybody who's watching the podcast tonight. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting us as you guys have.
Yes.
I want to take a moment to acknowledge, first of all, a big milestone for us, which was we had our first episode that hit over 1,000 views and counting.
No.
So that was part 2 of our series on sickle cell anemia. I want to take a very special moment to thank our guests, both Daphne, who joined us, and Aviva, who also joined us for that episode. It was really cool to kind of just be able to do a podcast and to do an episode on something educational, something that brought us, a wealth of knowledge, and it was really cool to see the impact that it's also had on people. I remember reading in some of the comments, there was a mom who shared how she just had a child, and her child was diagnosed with sickle cell anemia, and she's now having to navigate these waters. So it was just kind of cool to see how relevant this episode is, and I'm going to say cool, but also humbling to see how relevant it is. And it shows us that we're not just doing this for fun, but this is something that we're doing that really has an impact on people's lives, and it's a tangible thing. So we're so happy to see that. The response that we've had. Thank you guys so much for sharing the episodes with your friends. Without you guys, we wouldn't have been able to reach as far as we did with that episode. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And then I want to acknowledge another little thing that happened too, which was kind of cool, which is that same evening, I think after the podcast, Gift pulls me aside and he's like, "Hey Terry, guess what? You know the radio station CKUT here in Montreal? They heard about your episode about mental health." And Joey, this is the one thing we didn't tell you just now.
Yeah.
The episode about mental health is actually aired on CKUT.
So go check it out, fam.
Yeah. So it's on their website under podcasts. Yeah. It was aired a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy about that too, because Gift kind of knows, but the day that we did that episode on mental health was really a bit of a rough day for me, just with some things that had happened earlier that day. And it was one of those moments where you're just like, I just don't feel up to it. As much as I enjoy doing the podcast, and this is kind of an idea that I've been wanting to do for a long time, I was just not up to it, and to know that episode not only resounded with people, but it also made it all the way to CKUT, which to me, that's like, mind blown, So I want to thank Joey was on that episode. So thank you very much for your contribution, Joey, and Randy. Shout out to Randy as well. Who, if you guys are fans of our friend Randy, please check out his podcast. Gift. Would you like to give the guests the name of his podcast?
His podcast is called How Randy Feels.
How Randy Feels.
Okay, so it's on all Spotify, Apple, all those like audio podcasts. You can check them out. He's out there, and it's just basically random thoughts that Randy has, and he has strong opinions about them. right? You know, it could be like, how does he feel about cilantro? You know, so
Okay, nice.
so check it out. It's very, very entertaining. How Randy feels. Check it out on the podcast. It's really great, guys, and
Yeah,
you'll have a good chuckle.
Shout out to Randy, the homie, who's always with us to give us some interesting insight on the topics that we choose to cover. So we're really happy about that.
And today he couldn't join us because it's too big time for us.
Yeah, now all of a sudden he has his podcast.
He ain't got time.
Yeah, you know, Unashamed.
I see you, Randy.
Yeah, we're gonna. Disappointed, man. You know, that's how it is, man. You give a brother a chance, and then all of a sudden they just split on you. You know, I'm just kidding. Shout out to Randy, and we wish you all the best with your podcast. Yeah. And he's going to be hopefully back with us at some other point for some of these interesting topics. Yeah. So the title today. I was just telling Gift and Joey the story about how we came up with it, but essentially we're talking about what it means to be an ally, and particularly in these times that we've been living in with so much going on in the news and social media and, you know, all these causes for social justice and this and that. We're seeing a lot of people who are joining the community, who are trying to reach out to us and be a part of this movement, which is trying to get acknowledgement and respect for people in the Black and Brown community. And, you know, for our lives to be considered as important, you know, and it's not to say more important than, but just important, that we matter, you know. So so this has been an episode that's been in the back of my mind for a little bit. And, you know, just every so often I see a funny little story and I'm just like, I send it over to Gift. And like, we're going to talk about this in that episode.
We had this episode in the back burner for like a month or two.
Yeah, for real. This actually came before the sickle cell anemia thing. And, but then I was just like, okay, sickle cell anemia is a more important platform, you know, so a more important topic to cover on our platform. So I want to gather your thoughts, guys, on what is an ally to you guys.
Joey, please, before I say my piece.
Okay.
Because
I would consider an ally somebody who's a member of a privileged group in one way, shape, or form. So either you're privileged when it comes to race. In our society, would be your white person. It could be in terms of gender. Like as a man, I have privilege. I have male privilege compared to like a woman. So it would be somebody in the privileged group who's acknowledging their privilege and who seeks to improve the situation for their privileged counterparts.
Okay.
And I think an ally bears some responsibility of, you know, if they want to help, which I think they should, to take a bit of a backseat and to hear and listen to the voices of the community that they're trying to be an ally to, rather than to come and try to do it their own way or take charge or to lead the thing themselves, but to come in and, you know, listen. You know, it requires a certain amount of humility to acknowledge your own privilege one way or another, but also takes humility to go into a community and say, look, you know what? I'm not educated on this, and these people are experiencing things that I'm unfamiliar with. As much as I feel like I know, or I am down, or I connect, or whatever, and just, you know, approach that situation with that kind of humility. To me, that's being an ally.
Wow,
you know, wanting equality, and not just being passive about it, but doing something about it. You know.
Yeah, for real. I feel that.
That's very well said, Joe. Like, I don't know how I can follow that up.
You had a chance to go first, kid.
It's on me. It's on me. But like to add to what Joe is saying, I think like an ally is someone who stands in solidarity, right, with those who are being affected. And it's someone who also does not place emotional labor on the group that is being impacted, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yo, 2020, baby, we got the internet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for real, for real.
Go to the library and do research. We got the internet. You know, you can check it out. You know, you can do research. There's so many things out there. Yeah, and I mean, it's okay to ask the people who are affected, like, ways you can be an ally, for sure. But I don't think it should be the starting point. Like, that should add to the research that you've already done. That's what an ally is. And on top of that, like, an ally recognizes their internalized isms, whatever those isms are. Right.
That's true.
So that's my definition or perception of what an ally is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big part, to add to what you guys have said, but a big part of being an ally, in my opinion, is first of all, it's not about you personally where you stand in the mix of this stuff, but it's understanding that the cause of those who are crying out is bigger than where you fall in this. Yes. And I think what happens, is it's become, and this is another episode that we had planned, and it's going to come up, so don't worry, we'll talk about it. But in a lot of instances, what I see that kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way is, you have a lot of companies, for instance, that are saying that they're allies, right? That are aligning themselves with different social causes and stuff like that, and they're like, yes, we're going to change our logo to, we're going to put a fist in our logo, or we're going to change our logos to the rainbow flag, for like pride, and stuff like that. And the fact of the matter is, that logo is something visible. Right. And what's going to happen is automatically it's the same association that we make when we see yellow arches. We don't need to know what those two yellow arches are tied to, apart from, we know that, hey, that's McDonald's. Right. And the thing about that is that it's a question of, okay, well, how do we drive, are we doing something that drives dollars towards our cause, And I think that detracts from what it means to be an ally, So, whereas I'm just gonna, I'm not an expert on this, right? But like, to me, what's more impactful is, when you find out after the fact, after a donation has been made by a big corporation to a social cause, you know what I mean? That like, hey, they actually do care because, hey, they weren't boastering about it up front, but they just did the deed, you know what I mean? And that is something that to me is more impactful, So I think there's a fine line almost about being an ally, where the question is, what is that person getting out of aligning themselves with the cause and associating themselves with the cause, right? And like you guys have both said, you don't need to be versed, you don't need to know it inside out, you don't need to have been necessarily the person. You don't need to go to Georgia to pick cotton in the cotton field, right, to understand. But it's just, hey, I've taken the time to get to know about the situation, to inform myself, to educate myself, and not be a distraction to the cause, but bring a contribution, a positive contribution to furthering and advancing the cause. That's my humble opinion on what it means to be an ally. And
also, I think also another thing to highlight is like not to do it for the grams or the hashtags, right? Like you want to make sure that like also your intentions are like real. You really care about that cause. Like if you just want to do it for the grams or for the hashtags, you might as well not do it. That's it, right? Your efforts are going to be meaningless.
Exactly, because it's like it's now it's about the platform. It's about getting your face visible to people, and Meanwhile, the question is like, if there was nobody around, would you be doing the same thing?
Exactly.
If there wasn't the clout to chase behind going and doing certain things, would you still have that same reaction? So I think it's one of those things that really has to come from the heart when you choose to be an ally. Because if it's coming from anything else, then it's. I don't want to say that it's good. It's I understand sometimes that like it's a difficult thing for certain people because some people just have big platforms, right? So they will automatically have draw even if they don't intend to use their platform in a way to sway things. But it's just that there's that fine line between, like where you question where is it coming from. So I think you have to be careful with it. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think whether you have a platform or not, the results of how you're trying to be an ally, speaks for themselves, right? And like we're just talking about intention now, like make sure that you're in it for this reason, or you check your reasons why you're in it, and which I agree as well. But there's also that expression that the way to hell is paved with good intentions.
That's true.
Is that right? One thing I encountered by a lot of people who probably consider themselves allies because they care about the cause and all that, but they approach it in a way that's more harmful than beneficial, and because their intentions are good, they have trouble being corrected or criticized or having a course correction.
That's it, and that's a phenomenon that I've been hearing about. I was listening to a radio interview, and they were saying the person being interviewed was talking about like some of the groups that they've joined, like Facebook groups and different platforms and stuff like that, like in rallying with the Black Lives Matter movement, for example. And they were saying how they were being reprimanded by non-Black people in the group if their opinions slightly differed on certain things. And that's where it becomes a little scary, because it almost becomes like a cult thing, right? And when you think of the images that we've seen, throughout a lot of these protests, right, where the protest goes from being peaceful to escalating, and there have been reports of instigators, but there are also a lot of people who've been trying to just push their own causes and own agendas and stuff like that. And it's just like, whoa, okay. This is no longer about, what happened to George Floyd or what happened to Breonna Taylor or what happened to so-and-so. This is now becoming something where it's like, it's about that person who's kind of acting out. And it's sad because it's not representative, I think, of what the intent was initially behind these movements, One thing I'm going to make very clear to people is, when it comes to, I think this podcast, I think it's very clear and evident if you watched us thus far that, we are in line with the fact and our idea is that Black Lives matter and will always continue to matter.
Yes,
and that's not something that we will shy away from. But the thing about it is we want to be intelligent in how we approach this subject and how we approach this matter, because just because we may feel a certain way or we may be upset in a certain way because of something that happens doesn't mean that we will condone just wild behavior. You know what I mean? For us, it's a question of, rational thought. And the idea behind this podcast is really about getting truth out there, so understanding that hey, this is how when we see these things happen on the news, when we hear about these things happening in the media, when we see pictures of Black men getting arrested, when we hear stories like what's happening in Repentigny about a father having had the cops called on him because of a disagreement with his neighbor and him being pulled away from his kids and stuff, these things affect us as young podcast, majoritarily young Black men. And these things affect us and they have an impact on us, and we don't like to see them. So that's one thing that this podcast is really about making sure that that's understood. We will always be about the betterment of our people, because our people have suffered a lot at the hands of people, and it's been unjust. A lot of the things we've seen have been so unjust and so hurtful and unnecessary,
Yeah.
So I want to give you guys an example. I don't know if Giff remembers when I sent him this a while back. This is an image of an ally that I have to really question their intention behind this. So for this podcast, we never know if it's going to get picked up on the radio or something. So I'm just going to say, for those of you who are possibly listening to this at some point, maybe not paying attention to it because you have it hidden on your screen because you're at work or something like that or whatever. I'm going to pull up a very interesting image, and I just want to see what Gift and Joey's reaction is going to be. So just 1 second.
I'm reacting before it even shows up. I don't know what it is yet.
Ooh.
Oh yes, I remember. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
for those of you who do not see,
Oh my.
what is happening on my screen is you have a protester who was identified. Her name, I guess her artist name is, or her name coming out of this was Naked Athena. Okay. And she's sitting in the middle of a street. This happened in Portland, Oregon. She's sitting in the middle of a street, completely undressed. No, sorry, not completely undressed. She is wearing a beanie. And she's spread eagle, and she's facing police with her legs widespread. And when I read a little bit about the intent behind this is apparently people were saying that there's a need for feminine energy to calm the tension between everybody, and anyways, I don't understand it. Okay, I'm a very open-minded person when it comes to a lot of things. I have I have a lot of views that would probably shock a lot of people, but this to me was just like a total distraction from the cause. I look at this and I say to myself, is this really what this Black Lives Matter protest was meant to be about or not? And I wonder what you guys think. You imagine you guys are at a rally, at a protest, right? Protesting something, and then this happens. What do you guys say or do in that moment?
Terry, honestly, I probably just observe and stare it out and just soak in that nakedness and then deal with what it meant later. But that's a tricky one because I'm not one to criticize how people protest and all that,
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm not even sure if that was a white person that we were looking at, but it kind of looked like it was.
According to descriptions, she is a light-skinned person of color. I don't know how to interpret that.
So,
okay.
I'm going to assume that picture was taken during a Black Lives Matter protest?
Yes, it was. Sorry, yes. For context, it was a Black Lives Matter protest. It was kind of at the peak of tension when there was a protest in Portland, Oregon.
I mean, I can get the visceral reaction that a lot of people will have to something like that, especially society being kind of conservative about nudity and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see it serving as a distraction from the movement, but I don't know. It's also a form of protest. Like protest is shocking sometimes, I'd much rather look at that than watching people get hit in the head with rubber bullets and their heads split open and these kind of things. What old man get knocked down?
That's true. That's true. So,
because like I said, I couldn't tell that was a black person and where a person of color might not.
Okay.
So it's like you put, you're getting headlines that's maybe not, headlines having to do with anyone in the black community at all.
No question for you guys. Okay, so this is, you said it's a light person of color.
Yeah, light-skinned person.
Is that how it's described?
That's how it was described in an article I read. That's how the person was described in an article that I read this morning.
I mean, we all have different shades of whatever we are, right?
Right.
So if this person identifies as a POC, then we would have a completely different discussion here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't view it as a distraction to the movement if the person identifies as POC.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there, Gift, too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
If this person is white and they're being described yet a completely different identification that they have, then it's a different scenario, right? It's like you're starting to talk about the white savior argument.
Yeah, the white savior complex.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so many layers. If it is a white person, of how it can be problematic.
Exactly.
Even down to the sexualization of Black bodies, and
Exactly. So, like, I would want to know, like, how does that person personally identify as?
Mm-hmm.
If they identify as POC, then I'm like, respect. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I get you.
So that's where I stand with that image.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I share an image like that. I chuckled a little bit when I saw it.
Right.
I guess my thought about it is that became what people talked about for a brief moment over the reality, which is that there's still a lot of importance that needs to be given to police brutality and the targeting and racial profiling of Black and brown people. And now here's the thing. One thing that maybe doesn't get acknowledged enough is the mistreatment of Black women, right? And that's been a big point that we've been making. And the over-sexualization of Black women. I kind of feel, though, a little bit like that was a distraction, and it deterred a little bit from the importance of the movement, because then this just fuels people to see how unruly these things are, right? Like, you see how unruly these protests are. And it's true, like you guys say, I mean, there's kind of no right way to protest, and it's true. Like, I read something, it was a meme, and they were saying, like, like, no matter how people protest, basically the essence of it was, no matter how you protest, somebody's going to have an issue if they're racist.
Of course.
Was that you, Joey, who posted that?
Definitely that kind of message has been like circulating and stuff that I've been posting and stuff lately. So it's possible. But
yeah, of course. And anyways, so just to say that, like, I just, it's true. Like, there are many ways to protest and stuff like that. I just found that was a little bit. It almost felt like. I just felt like it was maybe just not the right message. But anyways, that's just me personally.
One of the things that I find is, like, often the goal of, like, shock forms of protest, and in this case it was kind of shocking because it was the only naked person. Is that it exposes how fickle and petty we can be. So, like, we can be, during the Black Lives Matter movement, we're seeing footage of people being abused by the police. We saw even on the federal level that Trump sent in people, unarmed vehicles, to come and kidnap people, pretty much. All these kind of things are happening. People are getting pelted in the head with rubber bullets, getting brutalized by cops. And these are all very extreme, super serious things, a lot more serious than a naked lady sitting on the ground. And it kind of can prove the point, that like heads are being crushed, but you guys want to talk about this woman,
it's fueling the wrong fire.
Yeah, but it also exposes that about us, though.
True.
Yeah. I mean, not that it needs to be, because it's very obvious. We, in the last few weeks, like, some guy who's gunned down 2 people or 3 people and killed 2 of them managed to walk by the cops with his hands up and escape and sleep in his own bed that night, while a Black man walks towards his car and then he gets shot 7 times in the back. So,
exactly, it's true.
But we always have to make that effort to juxtapose. Yes, I don't know. I was not going to pronounce that right, even after 3 tries. But
good job.
Like, we need to make that comparison, and like to say, like, look, this white boy was able to get away with this, and this Black guy wasn't even armed, and he got shot 7 times on the perception that maybe he might have something in his car.
Yeah.
So there's that, but there's other ways of doing that. Like, really, like, what is a naked woman really compared to a Black life? But it managed to grab the headlines, all the news. I remember that image. So I mean, there's something to it.
It's true.
Doing things that way, and I think part of like exposing like just those kind of sensitivities and stuff like that when there's like when the main issue is something a lot more severe and interesting and it's a critique at the very least.
Yeah, of course.
How we are as a society, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like even in the Black community, I'm sure a lot of more conservative people were completely disgusted by that and probably distracted by it for a little bit,
Yeah, of course. I agree. And it's so what's that again?
No, go.
No, I see that smile, so I know that there's an.
I'm good.
Okay. I think I found it to be a little bit of a funny thing. It for me, it was just more of a question mark moment. Like, huh? What? Okay, I guess. So that's it. And I think that's the important thing. Like, we've been talking about like just the importance of not being a distraction, I think, a little bit, as being an ally from the cause at hand, and when you're bringing up, Joey, something that I find very important, so you look at like what happened with Rittenhouse, the shooter at the rally. I think it was in Wisconsin, was it?
Yeah.
And you see that double standard that exists, and that's exactly what it is that we are so angry about, that we have these protests about, you know what I mean? And he proved the point, that some people seem to just get away with murder, and for us as Black people, we have to say that can't happen anymore,
Yes. It was such a painful truth.
Yeah.
It was such a painful truth seeing that.
That's it,
And that is a very clear picture of how things are. That is the system, right? That we live in. A system that accepts that,
Mm-hmm.
That's the harder pill to swallow, and that's the part that it kind of takes away my hope a little bit, because when I see the discussions that happen in response to stuff like that, there are people who I would have thought, I guess I wouldn't have assumed they were allies, but I would have assumed that they're people that love their Black friends and their Black family, and but they're taking the other side, like they're defending that boy for murdering people.
Yeah.
Because like they're seeing it through a completely different lens than what we're seeing it through, and they're not seeing that disparity that we're seeing, and it's hard to get them to see that. But as long as they don't see it, they're I don't know. It's like so systemic. It's ingrained, in people that they're more offended by the way we protest than by what's happening to us, than the reasons why we protest.
Yeah.
Exactly. I agree with you. So there's another little thing. This is a video that that I'm going to share with you guys. I came from about 2 years ago, and I shared it with with Gift this weekend. We had a good chuckle at it, and I just Joey, I'm curious to know if you've seen it, and then also what your take is on this situation. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up here. All right. Let's share audio for this. Boom.
I'm not. Do not hurt me. Do not hurt me. You understand? Do not be rough with me. Look at them. Look at them. They're beating me up. Don't beat me up, you mother. Don't beat me up. Look at them. Oh my God. I can't believe they're doing this. Oh my God. Hey. Look what they're doing. Oh, get the other side. I'm not listening. I swear you're being rough with me. You treat me like a Black person. You're gonna get sprayed. You're gonna get sprayed. Release your hands. Put it behind your back. You understand me? Do not hurt.
All right. So, for some context, Joey, that happened in the Orlando International Airport, a magical place on earth. And what ended up happening is that's a doctor Ironically, his name is Jeffrey Epstein as well. So that's kind of this guy has like the worst possible name right now. So what happened was apparently he seemed to have been intoxicated, and he was being rude to airport staff and flight attendants. So of course they called the police on him, and so that altercation happens. He gets wrestled to the ground, and he says, "You're treating me like a black person." And
I was like sympathizing right up until that, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, they are."
And here's the best part about it is I don't know if you caught it, but at one point he literally tells, he's like, "Guys, get the other angle, get the other angle." And
I didn't pick that up. Wow.
Get my good side, fam.
Yeah, get my good side while they're pummeling me to the ground. Wow. And here's another thing that I find crazy about it. So I watched an interview with him a few days later, and his face is all puffy, I guess, because he got maced and all this stuff. And he says, I was just trying to draw attention to how they treat black people, and this is what he says. So now I'm going to categorize this guy and give him the title of a-hole for the night because
he doesn't sound like an ally,
No, he was not at all an ally. He was drunk and belligerent, okay, and he got wrestled to the floor because of his behavior, okay. He was not. It's not like he was trying to protest. I'm pretty sure this guy doesn't even have any black friends. You know what I mean? And for him to,
he was talking,
yeah, of course, and he was just really trying to make a scene, and I think to try to, now find a way out of his situation and probably claim police brutality or so on and so forth. When, I think I don't know why. I can't say that that I saw what happened before that, how he treated people, but I'm pretty sure in this guy's case, he was acting out, and I think the police were just responding to the call that they received, and I saw a longer clip of that video, and the police were trying to get him to put on his handcuffs, and then he started fighting with them, and so on and so forth. So, what are your thoughts, Joey and Gift?
Well, I don't have the whole context of that video either, but when he shouted, "You're treating me like a black person or effing black person," I mean, that's it right there.
Yeah. And ally,
whether he has black friends or not, or knows down or not, or is it's an unfortunate way of trying to be an ally or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? One thing that he recognized was there's a problem with how black people are treated by the police, and he invoked that right there. I don't know.
This is the thing. An ally.
Go ahead, Kid.
An ally wouldn't say "Oh, I should be treated better because I'm white." You know what I'm saying? That's basically what he was saying in that video, right?
Yeah.
Look what they're doing to me. I'm white. I should be treated better than this.
That's what that exclamation meant.
Exactly.
Say that.
Exactly.
It's like, was he using that moment to try to educate the world? Look at what black people go through. I don't think so.
Yeah, I wish at least he would learn from that experience. Next time he interacts with a black person, I hope it will probably help him to be a little nicer. But my goodness, when I saw that,
imagine as the people were taking the clips, right? Imagine if you told them, make sure you put #woke.
Yeah, #woke. Or no. If he started, this would be the best.
Epstein woke.
If he started screaming, World Star. That's what I would have said. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I can't. I saw that clip and I was beside myself laughing.
Yeah.
It just goes to show the lengths that people go to, and unfortunately, this is somebody that's using our cause, our situation, what happens to us, to probably try to see if he's going to get representation from NAACP, or if he's probably thinking maybe I'll get Al Sharpton to stand next to me and try to fight on my behalf against police brutality, and you look at a situation and it's like, that's using your privilege in the absolute wrong way.
Yeah, so and rattling the cages there. He's not even taking the same, like, okay, he got pepper sprayed, but he was not fearing for his life.
No, of course not. Of course not.
And they're thinking like, oh, I could be dead by the end of this encounter.
Yeah, of course.
He was, you know.
The comment that made me laugh the most when I was reading the comments on the video was somebody goes, "Oh man, they didn't have to do Will Ferrell like that."
That was actually that kind of, I could see Will Ferrell reenacting that.
Exactly, totally, and he sounds so much like him. Yeah. So that really, that was a funny moment. It's a funny moment, but unfortunate. I mean, it's still, questionable force, but he's. I don't know. I don't want to speak out on it and say, I don't want to be one of those people that says, like when it happens to us, well, you see, I don't want to sound like that
guy.
Yeah. So.
For sure.
Yeah.
Can we speak about, previous allies in a few years ago, or even the ones that are happening right now, well, sort of allies or detractors, like Dr. Jessica Kroon. What's the sitch there? Or Rachel DeLazzo from a few years back?
Yes. So, okay, Joey, have you heard?
I don't know who the first name is that you mentioned.
Dr. Jessica Kroon.
Jessica Kroon, university prof.
Yeah, so she's a university professor. I'm going to see if I can find a picture of her to pull
she claimed to be Black, and she was teaching like in African studies or something like that.
Yeah. So, yes, she was...
it's a white person that's identifying as Black?
Yeah.
Like pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
She identified as Black and Afro-Latina, and she's written books about the Black experience and everything like that, and history books and so on and so forth. She was lecturing. She would even, according to reports, she would even use like the N-word in some of her lectures and stuff like that when she was reading books and stuff like that. I'm going to pull up her picture in a second. And what came to light, and she decided to share. So this is a picture of her here. And if you guys can see her, she's on the bottom of the screen. And what ended up coming out of the story is she actually came out a few weeks ago and say, look, I've been kind of just milking this for what it's worth, but I'm not actually Black at all. I'm a Jewish person. She grew up in the southern state, I think in Missouri or something like that. Yeah. And she had a troubled childhood, and she's claiming that that's the reason, that's what led her to try to hide behind this false persona that she's created for all these years. So Dr. Jessica Krug is her name. And yeah, so here's the thing that I find personally difficult about this situation is, to a certain extent, I mean, I'm hoping that she was sincere. That's what I can hope. I hope that she was sincere in her desire to be helpful to the Black community. If she's been involved with the Black community, any efforts, or if she's, I just hope that she was sincere. But now this is something that's happening way too often, which is
it's hard to say because her whole identity was based on a lie, right? So
exactly, and that question that causes you
automatically is like not even but
you question their credibility off the get go,
Yeah.
And you look at Rachel Dolezal, it's the same situation, Now, what do you think about this type of a situation, Joey?
I don't understand it,
but
I find that those cases, like the only previous case I'd heard of was Rachel Dolezal, so this sounds like she's kind of pulled the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
I find that blurs it causes issues for other underprivileged groups. And I don't know if it does the Black community any good either to have, people being as imposters or whatnot. But the type of discussions that happens after something like this is, oh, well, if I identify, if I feel like a Black person inside, why can't I be a Black person?
Yeah.
And then use that to try to discredit being transgender, for example, and would that, to try to compare, like, oh, well, like a boy feels like a girl, so you know what I mean, without understanding the actual psychology behind it. I find it blurs a lot of lines for a lot of people, and I think it ends up setting the discussion back instead of forward.
Sorry, go ahead.
My issue here is like you gained trust from like a specific community, right? Like the Black community. It's like you've gained so much trust, and you've like taken a platform that could have been taken by someone who actually identifies as Black.
Yes,
right?
That's a good point.
It's like
she's an African studies teacher.
Yeah, she was a teacher of Africana studies.
Right. So there's one Black person not getting paid to teach African studies.
Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, Rachel
Dolezal.
Yeah.
She started this movement.
Like that does so much harm, to the community in so many ways. Like, when you're looking at it ethically, even systemically as well, too.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's my thing with Dr. Kroon, Jessica Kroon. Now with Rachel, with Rachel, things become a little bit more tricky. But before I express my opinion on that, I'm curious what you and Joey think about Rachel's case. If you guys remember how things went down and the rationale on why she decided to perm and braid and all that nonsense.
Maybe can you fill us in a little bit? All the details I remember was that she was identifying as Black, and that was challenged at some point, and then it turned out that she's not.
Yeah, and she was part of like the NCAWP, I think, and
she was the chair of the NAACP, of her local chapter of the NAACP. She was adamantly involved. She was adamantly involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. She was speaking out a lot against a lot of social injustice towards Black people, and so on and so forth. And it came up in an interview because her parents started to say, well, hey, that's our daughter, and she's not Black. I mean, she is our kid, 100%, not adopted. Both of her parents are, very, very visibly white people. And, and here she is, with her hair. I remember the picture in the middle is the picture I remember the most of her, with her short kind of frizzy hair and stuff like that. And she even denied it in an interview on TV. She was being questioned as to her origins, and she was adamantly denying that that what her parents were saying about her was actually true. For some context.
But if it's the same thing like we were talking about in the beginning, if you're going to be an ally, then be an ally. Don't try to lead the movement or be a leader in the movement of the people you're trying to be an ally to.
Of course,
be an ally to the movement. And if you set up an ally organization, you can be a leader of that. You know what I mean? But don't go into the NAACP and somehow become a chair as an imposter. And you know what I mean? You're somebody who's part of that marginalized group.
And you see, the unfortunate thing is, the good intentions. It's like the good intentions in the wrong vessel. In this sense, now as a white woman, I would have tons of respect for her doing what she was doing and stuff like that. Now, this is, and Gift kind of alluded to it a little bit, but this is where her story
not being a chairperson at the NAACP either.
Well, okay, so here's where her story gets a little complex, and it's actually kind of similar a little bit to the story for Dr. Jessica. So Rachel Dolezal, I watched a documentary called The Rachel Divide on Netflix, and it was one of those days where I was just like, you scroll through Netflix for a while and there's like nothing kind of that speaks to you. So I was like, oh, let me just watch this thing and see what it's about, And of course, so it's a documentary on her and how her kind of starting from the point of like how they were supposed to try to do this like reality TV show or something like that. And she was going into like her history and her life, and they were kind of showing the aftermath of what happened to her with all of these interviews and what came to light about her race and everything. And when they started to talk about, at first I was just like, she's crazy, you know, and like that's a mean thing for me to say of anybody, you know, I acknowledge that. But when you started to see why she was the way she was, it kind of made me understand. So she came from an extremely abusive household, and her parents adopted children, and there's stories, this is all alleged, you know, but there were stories of her biological brother apparently having abused the children in the family. And so she fought to get her to emancipate from her family, and then to adopt her brother and sister. Her brother and sister are both Black. And she cut ties with the white side of her family because of the abuses that were going on in their household. And that's when she started this thing of just kind of identifying. And she would take her kids, her brother and sister, to the library to read books about their history, because she just felt like it was not a place for them to grow up in a white household and be taught, not taught their own history and everything. You know, so she felt this desire, this need to do that for her brother and sister, and she tried to really protect her brother and sister from the abuses that, you know, the alleged abuses that were going on in their household. So not saying that this excuses hiding her identity or anything like that, but it just gave me an understanding of who she really is. And you can see that this is somebody who is also coming from a place of just like severe mental, she probably has demons that she's not addressed in her own life because she was too busy taking care and looking after her younger siblings. You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate because then, you know, she becomes this laughing stock, you know, when people look at her and say, well, you know, look at this. But there's more to the story really than what was on the surface or what everybody came to know, you know. And unfortunately, if you heard the rest of the story, the news doesn't really care to share the rest of the story. So that's why I appreciate the documentary for that, because it just gave me greater insight. You know, not like I said, not condoning what she did, but it just gave me greater insight into who she is as a person, you know.
Yeah.
Gift.
Were her siblings interviewed at all in that documentary?
Yeah, they were. They were. Her sister.
What is the kind of feeling about all of this, like after everything exploded?
I'd be curious.
To be honest with you, I can't say that I remember very, very well. But I know that her sister really, really vouches for her. Like, her sister is on her side, you know. And she has a younger brother as well too, if I remember well. But like, I know that they support her. I mean, they don't necessarily understand everything, but they live that trauma together, and they're tight. They're really tight. And I think in the documentary, if I remember well, she was helping her sister leave her parents. Like, she was like, if I remember well, it goes back a while, but I know that like, she was really helping her sister kind of get like her life in order and stuff like that, because, you know, she was dealing with a lot of the trauma of what happened and trying to separate herself from her parents, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is it's complicated, right? And she didn't need to go to the length that she did, like to do her hair the way she did and wear the braids and all that stuff. But I mean, for her to fight for the Black community the way she did, I have to say that at least that I can respect.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like Rachel's story is a little bit more tricky than the professor there.
Very nuanced, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You know, the teacher, Jessica, she's saying that she's also lived through abuse, but now it's it's hard to accept because you're like, well, that's what Rachel said, you know?
Yeah.
So the question of sincerity, you know?
Yeah.
So anyways, on that, do you guys have any closing thoughts on what it means to be an ally versus a detractor or an a-hole?
Do your research.
Yeah, do your research.
Check your intentions.
Absolutely.
Don't do it for the grams or the hashtags.
Avoid the gram.
Avoid the grams. Okay? We all love the word woke.
Yeah.
You know, sounds good. We wanna have that badge.
Yeah,
But don't do it for that. So,
of course. There are too many woke people walking around asleep. You know?
Exactly.
Keep the issues, keep the conversation centered on the issues and not your hurt feelings for feeling misunderstood or whatever, you know, whatever it may be. And you're trying to be an ally and you make a mistake and you feel like, these people they're not understanding me right. That's not what I meant or whatever. You know, don't make your number one priority to set that straight. Just how do I do better next time?
That's it. It's not about you as an individual. It's really about a cause, and that's the thing, you know. To be an ally means that you're partnering with people that may be in a different situation than you. You don't come from the same background. You don't come from the same roots. You're not affected necessarily by the thing in the same way, but you just want to see that situation get better for that group of people. And it's a reverse thing because your hope is that those people will also be there for you the same way. So I think it's a question of understanding each other's humanity. You know?
Yeah.
So
but there's a thing, you know, like when you're dealing with the marginalized group and you're trying to be an ally to them, it takes a tough skin because not everybody within that marginalized group is going to be open to, you know, dealing with you in the way that you want to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
And they have their experience. Like for me, like the anger that I feel, you know, towards white culture and systemic racism is there and it's present, you know, and I'm pretty good at like keeping that in check when I'm dealing with people, you know, one-on-one or whatever. So I'm not going around like flipping off white people or anything like that. But, you know, there's some people that they're fed up, you know what I mean? And they might have words for you or something like that. And don't just take it as like, well, this is just reverse. I'm trying to help you and you're biting the hand that feeds you. And now I give up now. You know what I mean? Be a true ally and recognize like, you know, white people have been hard on these people or, you know, I don't know, straight people have been hard on these people.
And I think that's a true test of an ally, right? Is can you brave the storm? You know, can you brave the challenges? You know, can you brave the people that may just walk by you? You know what I mean? And not necessarily rejoice just because they see you. You know, and I think that's where it becomes a thing that's bigger than you. You know?
Yeah. I mean, they might straight up blast you for how you've exercised your privilege. You know, can you handle being blasted by marginalized people, or are you gonna be like, oh, well, I'm gonna take my help and leave, or, you know?
Yeah, of course. Now, I'm just gonna say this is not an excuse to treat people who are allies or are trying to be allies in a bad way. I mean, you know, my personal opinion is, you know, if you're rocking with me, then hey, we're cool. You know what I mean? As long as you're sincere about it, I'm cool. You know?
That's how I roll too. But you know as well as I do, not everybody in the community responds that way.
That's true.
And it's so easy for someone to just be like, you know what? I tried to help Black people out, but a couple of them were rude to me. So like, you know, hands off. Like, never mind.
Unfortunately, there will be people with a chip on their shoulder. You know, there will be people that have trust issues because of stuff that they've lived personally, that they've experienced. And it's not your place to tell people how they should act towards you. It's your place to try to get to understand maybe why. You know, for instance, I'm a male, you know, and if I meet, you know, if I have to work with somebody or if I meet or encounter somebody who's been abused by a male, I can't then turn around and say, well, you need to understand I'm not like all the other males. I just have to understand where they're at, you know, and say, okay, how do I, as a male,
As in hashtag not all men.
That's it. You know, I gotta just say like, yo, okay, like, and I understand,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's just you, and that's cool. I get it. You've been hurt. Cool. However I could work with you is how I'm going to try to find a way to work with you if I have to. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the approach personally. I feel like I feel should be taken.
Mm-hmm. Don't defend your internalized isms, fam.
That's it.
Oh.
So cool. So on that note, I think we're gonna just take a moment to thank everybody for checking us out tonight. Hopefully this episode has been a bit more fun and has just been something that you can relate to. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing to our podcast. And thank you again for your support. It means the world to us, honestly. And we look forward to hearing from you guys soon. And if you guys have any suggestions on topics, if anything comes to mind, be more than welcome to share them with us. And we'll be more than glad to look into them and discuss them. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. All right. Peace.
Yeah.